I'm sure you know how scary and horrible it can be to listen to one of your own solos, even when you know the song and can play the changes. But which exercises will help you play solos with better phrasing, more melodic and better rhythm? That's not about scales and arpeggios, but there are exercises you should be working on for those skills. Rhythm is of course incredibly important for jazz, and I will give you some ways to work on that. But first, I want to talk about an exercise to develop your melodies and play what you hear. Barney Kessel has a sort of surprising take on that, but we'll get to that as well. As you will see, this exercise will make it a lot easier to work on the rhythm exercise that follows it. This is true for any style of music. You want to make your solo a story, and you don't want the story to be random sentences dictated by the chords. You do that by making sure that there's a connection between the different phrases, which is a bit like making sure that your story is about the same main character or hero throughout the entire thing. Hopefully this will not come as a surprise, but if you want to improve this, you should work with a song that you know really well. And with that I mean a song where you know the melody and the chords by heart, plus that you can solo over it. This doesn't work if you're playing over a loop 251 or a static chord, and most likely the music you play or want to play is not like that anyway. This is similar to how most stories don't take place in a single room, but often have the hero travel around. Imagine that all Harry Potter movies were only in his room under the stairs and you never saw Hogwarts. But how do you practice a solo that doesn't have the Swedish chef as the hero for one chord, then a bar with Captain Picard, followed by Dobby for the next? One way to make sure that you have the same main character throughout your solo is to work with the same phrase. That way your solo is clearly about one thing, and this is called motivic development, one of the strongest melodic principles in existence. You will find this in a lot of songs. Just listen to Happy Birthday, or Autumn Leaves. But those are songs, not solos, so how do you practice improvising solos like this? Now in the beginning, you need to play the song out of tempo. It is essential that you give yourself time to listen to what you just played and then take the time to listen to how that's going to sound on the next chord. Eventually you will be able to do it in time, but in the beginning you really want to explore this rubato to make it easier. We'll get to the rhythm later. Start with simple and short melodies. I chose this song because you can easily hear the chords change when I'm playing rubato. Keep it short and simple so that you get used to how it works. Later you can make the motifs longer across several bars. And of course, the same goes for playing in time. You can begin to do that once you're familiar with the process. Remember that you can try to explore different motifs a few times to find one that you like. And that is important because, as Barney Kessel describes it, you also need to develop your taste.
It's very important that you develop the ability to play what you hear. And there's two steps involved. One is to develop the ability to play what you hear, and the second is be sure that what you hear is worth playing. Because just because you can play what you hear doesn't mean that it has any real musical value.
This is also a huge aspect of the last exercise that I'll cover in this video, but let me show you the next level to take this to. It is still useful to think about the motif as the hero of the story, and by moving the motif around the chord progression, you make sure that the hero is present in the story at different locations. But as you probably also know, an important part of any good story is how the hero is going through a transformation. Think of Luke Skywalker going from a farm boy on Tatooine to a powerful Jedi Master who can take up the fight against the Emperor. So you also need to be able to develop the motif you're playing and try to find a balance between a motif that is recognizable but also developing in a surprising and interesting way. Again, you want to start by practicing this rubato or out of time, and now you might also find yourself making longer motifs. If you go on for a longer time with this, then maybe the motif becomes completely different. But again, that's also something that will happen in a story where the main character develops into something new, for better or worse. For these exercises, you're sticking to a motif for a long time, but in a solo, you probably won't use only one motif throughout a whole song, just like there's more than one main character in a movie. An easy way to develop motifs is to play a similar beginning, but then change the ending. So instead of just moving the motif, you can start making simple developments by changing the ending or even leading into the phrase in a different way. Once you start moving this to playing in time, then you probably want to take a step back and start with simple, more mechanical motifs, and then gradually explore making them more complicated and adding more development. Now, this is a very powerful strategy. I believe it was Peter Bernstein who said that it was really just about playing one simple phrase at the start of the solo, and then the rest is just voice leading. Playing in time also helps you add one more important way to develop your motifs that is kind of difficult to get across when you're playing rubato: rhythm. And you can even stick to the same melody, move through the changes, and only work with the rhythm. The basic motif is just one melody that's sort of voice-led through the changes, like this. And adding rhythm, it becomes much more exciting. And this type of approach and thinking is a great way to develop your ability to play more interesting rhythms. Let me show you. There is a video that I came across 12 or more years ago that really inspired me when it comes to rhythm. While it's important to learn to play the right notes and follow the changes, I think what I really loved most is the rhythms that make those notes sound right. And this video with two great guitarists jamming on Sweet Georgia Brown really made something click for me. It was this solo with John Damian playing these great, fairly simple rhythmic phrases with only a few notes in there, not relying too much on longer lines, that really inspired me to rethink how I was practicing and also what I wanted to focus on. But how do you practice stuff like that? Now, if you want to develop one aspect of your playing, then an effective strategy is to limit the other variables so that you can focus on developing that skill. In this case, if you want to become better at playing more rhythmic phrases instead of 8-note lines, try limiting the number of notes that you're using. Again, there are two levels that I would suggest you try this with. This first variation is very similar to an exercise that I use in the Jazz Guitar Roadmap course to help students get started soloing over changes, but it also helps them develop rhythm. For each chord in the song, you have 2 notes and you try to make them close to each other across chords so that you have a decent chance of playing simple melodies that make sense over several chords. You could take these notes for the first few bars of It Could Happen to You, and finding these notes becomes a lot easier with the skills that you get from moving simple motifs through a progression, similar to the previous exercise. And since you're limited to those 2 notes, then you have to focus on other things when you're soloing. So rhythm, repeating notes, and God forbid, leaving space. Hopefully this will help you become more aware of the rhythms and also spark ideas that you can incorporate into your usual solos. Once you've explored what you can do with the 2-note exercise, you can of course open it up a bit and not stick to 2 specific notes. So instead, just try to play 2 or 3-note melodies while really focusing on the rhythm. In the next example, I'm still sticking to the motivic part of the melodies just to create something that really makes sense over a few bars. When it comes to improving your phrasing and vocabulary, you can also rely on motivic development as a strategy. This is about exploring what you can do with a phrase and making that phrase a flexible part of your vocabulary. Take a not too long lick and move that around a song. In the beginning, just explore how you can move the phrase around the progression. So take a phrase like this. Now challenge your technique and imagination to move that around the song. Start rubato and give yourself time to develop a line that will fit the next chord and has the same type of flow. This does mean changing the lick most of the time, but as long as you hear that it's the same phrase, then it's fine. Don't try to be too mechanical about it. And you can keep on working on this a bit to make the phrase more flexible, and gradually you can of course start to improvise solos where you're inserting that phrase into your solos in ways that make sense. That doesn't mean using it every bar, just trying to use it as much as you can. There are many places that you can find licks to learn and use for this exercise, but one of the best places to do so, and a way of studying that will also improve your phrasing, your ears and your timing, is to learn solos by ear. Now this can be very difficult, but it doesn't have to be. Check out this video where I show you 5 classic solos that are all great places to start if you want to sound more like jazz and get into learning solos by ear. Check it out, learn jazz, make music.